Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Church Leadership Lab. We're really glad to be with you and really glad to have a conversation that hopefully helps empower healthy churches. If you have listened to this podcast before, you know that is what we're all about. We love to have conversations that hopefully build into you as church leaders that ultimately leads to empowering healthy churches. And we are really excited for another one of those today with Pastor Travis Spencer. Now, Travis serves as the lead pastor at the Fields Church, a multi-site church in Mattoon and Charleston, Illinois. He's been on staff at the church for 25 years. Now, he's also an author and recently wrote a book titled Wonderful: How to Live a Fulfilled Life in a Very Full World. In addition to pastoring and writing, he's served on numerous community organization boards and as a chaplain for the Eastern Illinois University football team. He and his wife, Joy, grew up and still live in the Mattoon area and have three sons, Dakota, Riley, and Cooper. Pastor Travis, welcome to the Church Leadership Lab. It's good to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much. I mean, what a privilege and what an honor.
Yeah. Well, we're going to jump into our conversation, talk about all things. What does it look like to be fulfilled in ministry, to have longevity in ministry, to serve faithfully, all of that. But before we jump into that, I'd love to ask, we ask this of every guest, what's something that doesn't make the public bio, the one that we just read, the one that makes the back of the book, but all your friends and family would know about you?
Oh, if you'd ask our family, they know that we love to travel, whether that's missions or vacation.
Nice.
We're kind of a life of adventure, and like we'll just get in a vehicle, get in an airplane, and go.
I love it.
They may tell you right now, Travis is in his doctorate too, so it's very busy right now. So
okay.
So studying. But so that's a little behind the scenes there.
Yeah, doctorate, writing a book, pastoring a growing church. You got plenty going on, is what I hear.
Yeah, but it is a thrill ride. It's fulfilling. It's fun. It can get busy, but it is rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd love to jump in. You recently wrote a book, like we just talked about, called Wonderful, which explores how do you live that fulfilled life in the world that we are in, which for most everyone is a very full world, full schedule. So can you just kind of unpack at a 30,000 foot level, kind of what you share in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. And even the genesis was 25 years of ministry. And I start looking at the people, but that's not just our congregation. That would be, coaches, football team, all those things that I've intersected with, CEOs on boards. In 25 years, you see that, people are busy and it's easy to feel empty even when your plate is full. Mm. And it reminded me so I just told you our family likes to travel. We were floating in the Caribbean and on a cruise boat. So have you ever been on the cruise boat? It's, it's just this massive resort floating in the ocean. Yeah. And there's just unlimited everything, especially food. And my family, it's a great vacation for three boys because, you can say yes all the time to food. So I'm laying there by the poolside. My son Dakota's next to me, and you hear the Caribbean drums and everything in the background, and you're floating, and all of a sudden Dakota gets up, my oldest, and gets up from the pool and just starts to walk away. I say, "Hey, where are you going?" He goes, "Get another shrimp burrito." And I'm like, "Hey, bring me back a taco." But it's those trips that you eat and you eat and you eat. And there is that moment that you say, "I have a stomach ache. I don't feel good. I've eaten too much." And what I think is our world, our people, our churches, our pastors, it's not that we have a stomach ache, we have a life ache. Mm. That we really get to that place and we're like, why does my life ache? Like, what's wrong? Why am I so full yet not satisfied, not fulfilled? And so that's the genesis of it. And then I interviewed, I have a journalism background. So I interviewed hundreds of people online, offline, just phone calls and, emails, everything. And I asked a very simple question: what brings you fulfillment? Yeah. And I took all of these answers and I started to put it into categories and okay, I see these three areas trending. And it was either their personal lives and their personal soul care brought them fulfillment. Like for instance, I'll go to church, it feels good. When I worship, it feels good. So it was kind of the soul care. And then the second answer that was pretty common was people in my life, like watching my grandkids play baseball or watching my kids get good grades or So the people in their life. And then the last one that was very common was just their purpose. It was their job. It was, when or going on a missions trip. And when I fed those kids on a missions trip, it felt
Yeah.
good. And so I kind of took that in a good pastor way. I found 3 Ps, and it's like, your personal care, the people in your life, and your purpose. And I don't mean that to be cliche. It was like, that was the real answers from the people I interviewed. It was like, it fell into those 3 lanes or those buckets. And so I just decided to write on those. And then I drilled a little deeper and found even some subcategories that I thought was from those interviews. And then I really intertwined a lot of my personal life too.
Yeah. Well, what I'd love to do is dive maybe a little bit, like kind of looking at that big picture, dive a little bit deeper into some of how those aspects of a fulfilled life, the 3 Ps, some of the things that you kind of unpack in the book, but how do those kind of play out for church leaders? I know ministry, the challenges that church leaders face are unique. And you know that obviously with 25 years of ministry there at the church. So how can church leaders kind of apply some of those things to, in the context of ministry where they're at, experience that fulfillment?
Yeah. So I would say a church leader and a pastor, or any church leader, those 3 buckets still exist in your life. Just make sure they're in the right priorities. And so we as church leaders get really wrapped up in metrics, measurement, our systems, our structure, data, and all of a sudden we start driving what we do by our measurements, and we prioritize ministry with and metrics over our own health. And so I think we have to get those lanes in order and say, yeah, systems matter, like absolutely. And metrics matter. We measure what matters, and that's all important. But if we drive ourselves so hard to metrics to the place where we are unhealthy, we're going to really, how can we serve others as church leaders? Have you've been on an airplane and you get on and the stewardess always says, in case the cabin pressure, decreases, there's going to be an oxygen mask that falls down. And if you're sitting next to a child, make sure you put your mask on before you put your kid's mask on. Right. And I'm thinking as a dad, there's no way, like if this really happens, I'm putting my kid's mask on. But the reality is if I can't breathe, I can't help my kid. And it's the same thing with church leaders. If we're not healthy and we're not taking care of ourselves, how can we be good church leaders? How can we, all of a sudden now the metrics and the systems don't matter because our own lives are unhealthy.
Yeah.
And so to find fulfillment and satisfaction, let's get those things prioritized. Let's get them in order.
Yeah. Is there anything that any area in specific because obviously living a kind of a spiritually healthy life, there's multiple aspects to that. Are there any places in particular that you've noticed in, 25 years of ministry in your own heart or in those that you've worked with, pastors that you've known, where it's like, this tends to be the area that starts to go first? So, sort of like the warning on the dashboard of like, hey, I'm starting to move into kind of unhealthy territory.
Yeah. So personally, I can speak to myself if all of a sudden my Bible is just a tool to do ministry, I know I'm in trouble because now I'm reading it for regurgitation. I got to teach on this. And then it's no longer feeding me. So I think you can evaluate, why am I reading the Bible? The other thing is, because spiritual life doesn't have great measurement, there's no thermometer. There isn't a dash, there's not a specific dashboard to say, hey, you're running low. The signs then are, am I eager to spend some time with God? Do I pull into the drive of the church parking lot and take a big sigh and go, do I have to go in? Are we, we're not only are we multi-site, but we're multi-service. And there's times I'm heading into the second or third service going, can I go to lunch? Do I have to do it again? Yeah. And that's probably just a little sign of I'm too tired. I think real practical, you can look at how often you're on Sundays. So this is any church leader. It doesn't have to be a pastor. If you're worship, if you're in kids, like if you're scheduled and they're depending on you 50 weeks a year, that's way too many.
Yeah.
And so you can look at your calendar, you can look at your Bible reading, you can just kind of audit your own prayer life. I think you can talk to like a spouse or someone really close to you and say, where do you think I am on a 1 to 10 in my spiritual health right now?
Mm.
It'd be interesting what they see in us, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes that's a question that I don't know if people always want to ask, because sometimes the answer is from those who are around you and observing you. Sometimes the answer can be quite a bit different than what you have in your own head, you know,
Yeah.
when it comes to that.
My biggest concern on all of this is we can fake ministry pretty well,
Yeah.
and the metrics won't change that quickly.
Yeah.
Like you can pack a room and be super unhealthy inside.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful that we're not faking it, and we're, you know, because if we only measure the metrics, we can say, you know, everybody still showed up this weekend, so just keep doing the grind.
Right.
Eventually we'll fall flat.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to a little bit of, I mean, I know some of what we're going to cover, which is longevity in ministry. Because if you're in that spot, one, where you're unhealthy, or two, where you are faking it, and even if it's not an intentional, hey, I'm just going to fake this, but you've just over time slid into some of those habits. I mean, you can't keep that up for long and keep your soul at the same time. I don't think I think that's one of those things that if you don't have, you're not going to have much longevity at all.
No, and you're absolutely right. Like a healthy soul is helps you have longevity because you know, I know if you're in this game for a long time, you're going to have some really bad seasons and some bad days.
Yep.
And when your days are bad and the phone call's bad and that meeting is bad, you better have a healthy soul.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
or you're looking at the one ads, or you're like, you know,
Yeah.
I might be good at sales, you know.
Yeah.
So you got to be really careful about that.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to dig in a little bit more on longevity. You know, I mentioned, as kind of read your bio, that you've been ministering in the same place for 25 years. And that's amazing, first of all. But also, I'm sure it hasn't been easy, that it hasn't been 25 rosy, perfect years, everything up and to the right. So I'd love to just hear from you. Like, what do you think some of the keys to longevity in ministry are that you've experienced, at least?
Yeah, I think you need to really embrace your calling,
Mm.
and you need to know why you're doing what you're doing, and then you know that God called you, and it's not just you're following someone's footsteps, or you had a really cool youth pastor and so you thought I'll be a youth pastor too. And
Yeah.
like you just really have to, like, and sometimes there is some real soul searching in my calling.
Mm.
And the other thing is, I think you realize your calling isn't always a position. So okay, I've been here 25 years, or a title, let's say title. I've been 25 years, but I've not had the same position for 25 years.
Yeah.
I've started youth pastoring. Then I switched to family life and even kids. I saw that we didn't have a good, you know, you're a youth pastor, and then you look back and I go, we don't have a feeder into the youth program.
Yeah.
Because I was paid. It was the traditional smaller church. You get a senior pastor and then hire a youth pastor.
Yeah.
But then any of the kids in next gen was all volunteers, and we just didn't have a strong feeder. So we're like, hey, let's reorganize this and have a strong feeder. And so my wife and I then went into more family and kids ministry, did that for just a couple of years. And then my father-in-law was actually pastoring, and he announced that he was going to retire way before that any of us thought he would.
Okay.
And then the board asked if I would take over and consider putting my name in as lead pastor. And, you know, if I only thought I was going to be youth pastor, then during all of those like twists and turns of staffing and someone else, you know, I would have maybe said, well, no, I'm only youth pastor. You know, so I think you have to, longevity is God's calling you to be a minister, not a position or a title.
Yeah.
And then I think you got to constantly listen to him, like constantly ask him, am I still where I need to be? And so that's one. The real practical side of longevity then is just healthy relationships.
Mm.
That's in the church. That's in the community.
Yeah.
I think we forget that. Like, if I'm going to live in this community for 25 years, I need to have a lot of friends outside of the church too.
Yeah.
That's why I'm on these boards. That's why I go coach my kids' baseball team. That's why I do these things. Is you got to, I want to be in the community. And then the blessing of that is you start pastoring the community, whether you have that title or not. You're seen as, if something goes down in the community, hopefully you're the first they call. Mm. Because, well, he's been here 20 years. Like he's one of our key pastors in our community. And so there's a lot of blessing and longevity there.
Well, if you're in ministry, then you know church operations can be a huge challenge. There's a lot to do, little time to do it, and whether it's just you or you have a team, my guess is you have a full plate. So how do you do things like communication and engagement, stewarding your finances, managing your digital presence, fostering community, and so much more in a way that builds a healthy church? Well, answering that question was the goal of creating the Guide to Healthy Church Operations. We wanted to take our 40 plus years of experience serving the church, combined with wisdom from various experts to provide a blueprint for how you can navigate the ever-changing world of church operations. In this guide, you'll find things like how to improve member engagement and participation, building into staff and volunteers, making better decisions with clear metrics, the essentials of financial stewardship for churches, and so much more. And of course, we wanted to give this to you for free. So there's a link in the show notes to download the Guide to Healthy Church Operations. And we would love for you to grab a copy and use it to help grow a healthy church. I'd love to touch on the multiple roles kind of in the same place, because that's something that can actually, I think, bring up some of its own challenges. Did you experience any of that going from a youth pastor to lead pastor? And I know it didn't happen in a matter of, a year or two, but sometimes that can be tricky to lead, knowing I used to be seen as this role or this, position on the totem pole, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm stepping into another one. Were there any challenges with that you had to navigate?
Yeah. My top two would be, one, you have to understand not everyone's going to see you as lead pastor yet. They still see you as, isn't that the youth guy? Isn't that and I got saved in this church. So, isn't that the kid that Joy brought to church,
Yeah.
and now I'm their lead pastor. So you don't force that, you earn that. You just earn it. So longevity is you make good decisions. And when you stack good decisions, all of a sudden you earn people's trust.
Yeah.
The title does not give you trust.
Yeah.
The title is just that, you're the title, but consistently good decisions earn a lot of trust. And the next thing you know, you can make bigger decisions. And the next thing you know, people are saying, they're nodding their head and saying, yeah, we believe in this. We should do this.
Yeah.
And so that's one of them. The second thing, especially the youth pastor to lead pastor, and you're moving on, is there's some humility knowing that there's someone else that's going to come and do youth ministry for you.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with some new decisions and direction. Like,
sure.
Like I started that. I own that. That's my logo. That's my,
Right.
You're like, what do you mean you're changing from Wednesday to Sunday or whatever? It's like,
yeah,
you gotta like give the next person, it's a succession plan that you have to pass the baton and be okay with them running the next lap.
Yeah. I think that's really wise, especially sort of the first part of that, where you're talking about stacking those decisions and really just giving it time to earn that trust. And then, it's interesting though, because there's two sides of it, right? There's those that you're ministering to, but then there's also that personal side of, oh, somebody's now doing, like you said, my job, or changing the name or the logo or the, that's the part that I feel like doesn't always get talked about in making some of those transitions.
Now we hold on to that. It's like, that's my baby. I created
right?
that thing, and we've got to let go. We got to let go, let it, it's not going to be a 180 shift, but there's going to be some differences, and it's okay.
Yeah. Now I'm curious, because I think it's such a beautiful thing. And I mean, firsthand what God can do with 25 years of ministry in one place. But that's not everyone's story, and not everyone's called to that or in that type of situation. So how can people discern for the ministry that they're in, if they're sensing, man, should I stay? Should I go? Obviously, you had some transition even in the same place. And so, yeah, I'm just curious if you could speak to that, if you know, there have been any, even coaching other pastors or thinking through, hey, should I stay? Should I go? Is this a new role? Is this a new place? You know, what would you say to people who might be wrestling with some of that?
I think a good question you can ask yourself is, if I would walk away today, am I going to be sick to my stomach that I don't get to do that right here with these people?
Mm,
Because you're not probably not walking away from ministry. You're walking away from an assignment or a new location.
right.
So if you can envision not being with these center of people and you're okay with that, then the door is probably opening in your heart. I think God actually, like, I don't think the on ramps and off ramps are like crazy 100-mile-an-hour turns. I think it's like you start sensing
Mm,
a slow off ramp. And then if you can start envisioning yourself in a new place and you're okay with that, don't feel guilty to explore that. Maybe the Lord is releasing you and he releases us slowly.
yeah.
But the other way is you might explore that and you're like, there's no way I'm supposed to be here, that God just gave me a fresh vision. So then what you do is you drive those stakes even deeper into the ground.
Mm,
And you say, no, this is my time. Like, God has given me a vision. I don't think God's going to give us a vision for something bigger and better that takes, a couple of years to do and then release you in 3 months.
yeah.
Listen, we're going to get asked in ministry to go different places. Like, I get the call of like, hey, there's this open church at this big, whatever in this metropolitan area. Are you interested in serving there? I'm like, why would God have given me this vision that we're in the middle of right now
Mm,
just to steer me somewhere else on a whim? And so I think you got to listen to the Lord on what he's doing right now. But if you're sensing a slow off ramp, like, it's okay to explore that.
yeah. Well, I think too, sometimes that in that exploration, your heart does become alive to a fresh vision for where you are. And like you said, like without, if we use the off ramp, like if we're driving on the highway, right? And if there's this exit in 2 miles sign, and you kind of get over to the right lane, and you're sort of like, okay, yeah, I think I'm gonna think about exiting here. Sometimes we have to do that, ourselves in order to realize, no, actually, I want to stay on this highway. I want to keep going. But yeah, if you don't never have that freedom, it obviously is a challenge then.
So we've interviewed, a lot of staff or like, to hire people. I tell them 3 things are going to happen because you're in this interview process. One is you're going to have this like God aha moment that this is where you need to be. So you're supposed to relocate here, or through this interview and this process, you're going to realize you are leaving your location, but it's not here, it's somewhere else.
Yeah.
Or through this interview process, you're going to realize I'm supposed to be right where I'm at home, and I'm going to drive those stakes deeper.
Yeah.
And so having one interview process is okay. It drives you home. Now I do tell our team, like, if you need one interview to like sort out where you're at with God, but if you start having 2, 3, 4 interviews, that means something's wrong here and you're looking.
Sure.
And so we have to be really honest with our team and say, I just sense like change is happening and I'm going to be interviewing. But I think one interview, you're going to figure out, am I leaving or am I staying?
Yeah. Now, I know that part of longevity in ministry is walking through difficulty, walking through suffering. I mean, you can't be somewhere for a long period of time without that. And so, you have a chapter where you share about losing your parents in a 3-month time period. How did you walk through that? I mean, how did you lead a growing church, a ministry that's going well, but also walk through personal grief and deal with that at the same time?
Yeah. I had to learn to be human
Mm.
instead of just being a pastor. And I had to realize, and it took me a while. So, I mean, a little bit of my story was my mom or my father was diagnosed with cancer. So we knew that was happening.
Yeah.
So I could kind of pastor and work through my dad's
Sure.
cancer. And I knew that. And then my dad passed away, and he actually, like, his funeral was on Easter, the Saturday before Easter. So
Wow.
it's just like, that's that, in a church leader's world, like,
Yeah.
not the best weekend, And
Yeah.
so I'm grieving that. I'm grieving I'm trying to figure out my role as a pastor on Easter weekend when I can't be there, and all that. So I work through that. And then literally, like, a month later, I found out my mom is completely full of cancer, and she dies like 4 weeks later.
Wow.
So within 3 months, we had 2 funerals, and it just seemed like a blur.
Yeah.
And I really, like, I look back, I can't even tell you, like, which funerals was which. It was really a blur. But because of that blur, then I'm still pastoring in this blur. And in that time, I had to realize I have to depend on my team.
Yeah.
I have to depend on paid staff. Not everyone has that. And so we have great volunteers. I had to just lean in on them and say, can you just run this? Can you help lead this?
Yeah.
I can't do that right now. And that was hard, but I was starting to actually make some poor decisions because my head I was in the office, but I wasn't in the office. I was there, but I wasn't there. And so when you start sensing, I don't really care. If you're in the room and there's a meeting and you're like, I don't care, just do whatever you want. It's time to, like, step away a little bit and clear your mind.
Yeah.
So I had to learn to lean on my team. I also had to really learn to lean on, like, personally surround myself with people that are really meaningful and they can speak life into me. Some of those people were family. Some were some colleagues in ministry that I just, like, was very safe to talk to. I had to have that safe pastor that I called and said, I need to talk. Like, I'm not having, I've mailed this in for the last 5 weeks. I need to let someone know I've been winging it here for a while. So yeah, you gotta put a lot of good people around your life and be human, and you're going to grieve. I was grieving. And because I surrounded myself with good people, it took a few months, but I could, the church was still there. When I came back fully mentally ready to go, everyone was still there.
Yeah.
And when we think the church rises and falls on us, we're going to stress ourselves out, and we will not be built for longevity. We'll burn out. We're going to burn out way too quick.
Yeah. And when you forget, like you said, the first thing, you forget that you're human. And so the emotions that you feel, the emotional health, mental health, that is not something you can shortcut. And if you try to, your, role as a pastor, your work as a pastor will suffer tremendously because you just can't do that. And so I think that's a really good encouragement for people who either find themselves in a similar season, or for people to stow away, because eventually we'll all be in difficult seasons. So I think that's helpful.
I also learned my church already knew I was human. And so they were actually more pushing, like, take some time off. My board was like, you need a sabbatical, and so I'm trying to protect I'm super pastor, I don't need any of this. And they're the ones who are like, you need this. Yeah. And so I actually needed to, like, listen to them, and they were actually, it was a role reversal. They're starting to care for me, calling me and saying, hey, how are you doing? And that was okay. Like, I needed to learn how to receive that. That was hard to receive, but I learned to receive that.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, one of the things that we hope to accomplish on this show is conversations that empower healthy churches. I think a lot of our conversation talks to just how important healthy leaders are, and being in healthy places, and then ministering for, as long as the Lord gives. But one of the things we like to ask all of our guests then is, in your opinion, what is one essential component of a healthy church?
Wow. Yeah. Forward movement and a pathway. Like, I think a healthy church is always going to see people moving and progressing forward. And so have we created a pathway for personal growth, taking steps? We're not just filling rooms and filling programs. So it's kind of the program program mindset or pathway mindset. I think a healthy church will always have a pathway for people to continue to move forward and grow and take on more responsibility, grow in their leadership. And so I think a healthy church will have a pathway for growth.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Well, let's do this. I'd love to jump into, we have kind of a final section that we call our final five. These are a little more rapid fire, but would love to jump into those, with the first one being, what is one book that you'd recommend to church leaders?
I'd recommend Soul Keeping by John Ortberg.
Yep.
So he actually interviews and sits with Dallas Willard. So Dallas, if you want to go deeper, you read Dallas Willard. If you need, if you need someone to tell us about Dallas Willard,
the cliff notes a little bit.
This is the book. I read this. I've read it twice now. I read it again for one of my classes, and it was like, it goes back to that one bucket. Like, make sure your soul is healthy. And so, Soul Keeping by John Ortberg, great book.
Yeah, great book. What's the last thing that you listened to? Whether Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you listen to things.
Yeah, right now, recently, I've been on Spotify. I'm on the Passion 2024 set list. So the Passion conference was just over, and I'm like, I don't know how I stumbled across it, but I'm like, this set list. I was blown away by some of the older music. This is Passion 2024, and they went back a little bit in some of these older worship songs and redid them. I'm like, I don't know. It's really, really resonating with me right now. So that's on my Spotify right now.
Yeah, I'm sure we could jam out for a while on some of those songs, because being a worship pastor for 15, 16 years, I'm sure some of those were my favorites early on. So I'll have to check that out.
It's good.
All right, number 3. What is your favorite piece of technology? And the only rule on this one, you can't see your phone.
Okay. What about an app?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So favorite would be more. Okay, let me explain this. Life 360, which we know what Life 360 is. It's you can tell where all your kids are and your family is. But what's interesting, my kids are spread out now, and we use it not like, when's my kid coming home, but it's like we, in a weird way, can stay in touch with each other. Like, I'll pull into like a grocery store or something, and my son, 7 hours away, calls and says, "Hey Dad, what are you doing at Walmart?" And so I don't know. It's been like this weird way to connect with one another, and we're not spying. It went from when they were teenagers, we were spying on them.
Sure.
Now we're connecting. So it's fascinating that our family uses Life 360 just to stay in touch.
Yeah, that's very cool. I love that. All right, number 4. What is a quote or piece of advice that has stuck with you over the years?
Yep. I had an opportunity to be with an incredible missionary, Bob Hoskins, who hears from the Lord and just does crazy things. Like, one of those guys that's like, I'm supposed to get on a plane tomorrow and go to this country, and then mid-flight he redirects his flight, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And so I sat down with him. I had an opportunity. I said, "So how do you hear from God?" And I remember he just said, "This is so simple." I thought he's going to give me a book. He goes, "I figure if you hang out with someone long enough, eventually they'll talk back to you."
Wow.
And that was it. And I was like, that's it. Like, we're all struggling to hear from guys. Like, I figure if you hang out with someone long enough, they'll talk back to you.
Oh,
and I was like, geez, you really simplified that for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's really, really good. I love that. All right. Number 5, what is one thing that you'd like to communicate to our audience of church leaders?
Find a church or find a mentor that is a few steps beyond you. So we have a couple churches that are a little bigger than us and doing some things that we look at. We're like, man, that's great. And I have a couple pastors that are, in this game a little bit longer, and maybe they have a couple more locations and learn this multi-site thing. Always find someone that is a few steps where you want to be and just start learning.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Travis, I'd love if you could just kind of share with people where they can connect with you, grab a copy of your book, just kind of follow along with what's going on at the church. Could you share that with our audience?
Yeah, the easiest way right now is we created a website just called readwonderful.com.
Nice.
And we're actually I'm in the process right now releasing small group sessions too. Nice. So we'll give all that away to pastors if someone wants to use it. So the book's on Amazon. You can go there too. But if you want to learn a little bit about me, a little bit about the book, readwonderful.com.
Fantastic. Well, we'll make sure to link to that and encourage everybody to check that out. But thank you so much for your time today, pouring into our audience, sharing your wisdom, sharing your journey, and the things that you have learned along the way. We so appreciate it. And thank you to those of you listening and watching this right now. We hope that it has been helpful. We hope that you're encouraged. We hope that you're strengthened. And we hope ultimately that it leads to empowering more healthy churches. That is our goal. And if this conversation has done that, we would love to invite you to share it with somebody, whether it's sending a link or leaving a review or subscribing. All of that helps in us getting these conversations into more church leaders' ears. So we would love for you to do that. And we're so grateful for our time today. And we look forward to next time.
This episode of the Church Leadership Lab podcast is brought to you by Ministry Brands, the largest provider of church technology software. Over 90,000 churches rely on Ministry Brands for their single platform solution that brings together all the digital tools a church needs. From online giving to websites to church management software and more, Ministry Brands is leading the way in simple to use, innovative solutions, all with the goal of empowering healthy churches. To learn more, visit ministrybrands.com.